The accessibility breakdown by inclusion impact accessibility.
Hey, welcome to the Accessibility Breakdown. I am Mark, and this is
Justin.
And
Pete.
Hey, Pete. Every week we pay tribute to those who stand out to us as leading by accessibility by picking 3 topics that strike us in some way. This week we're going to talk about accessible game theory. This is an article by Sherry Baron-Haber. It's very interesting, a really interesting kind of angle and take. We're going to talk about the web is being made accessible for IA, not people. This is by 2 people, Jonathan Zong and Frank. Go ahead, Justin. You say it.
Frank Alovsky.
Alofsky. Thank you. I don't know why you're so much better than that than I am. Disability is a Pawn in Geopolitics by Bianca Prince. And as you all have noticed, we have a guest with us today. Pete is from Onward Accessibility. Pete and I have known each other for a while now. I think we met 2 or 3 years ago at Enabling, which is coming up. And kind of in one way or another have stayed in touch, hung out at other conferences, CSUN, since then, which has been great. You struck me as somebody who kind of got accessibility, at least in the way I define got accessibility. And we're super excited to have you with us.
Well, thank you. It's really awesome to be here. Really appreciate you inviting me on and letting this happen.
Of course. And I have to say, we tried to get you on as our first guest, but scheduling, you know how that goes. But Pete was the first person to reach out to us and say that he's like, are you ever going to do guests? I want to be a guest. So we finally made that happen, and I'm excited. With that, why don't we dive right into it? Let's start with accessibility game theory. This is Sherry's article. And I have to say, when I first started reading this, I guess I didn't know what to expect. I was kind of like, is this going to be some gamification kind of thing? But it wasn't. It was very different than that. And why don't we start with you, Pete? Can you tell us a little bit about this article and kind of what you picked the article? So what struck you with this?
Yeah, so it's interesting you mentioned gamification, because I think a lot of times when people hear game theory, that's what they start thinking about. Yeah. But if you're not familiar with game theory, which to be honest, I wasn't, I was kind of aware of the concept, but not like the details about it. So I did do a little research on like kind of game theory as a whole before getting into the article. But essentially, like thinking about game theory is about like you have players, right? And your actions as a player is going to be determined based on kind of what's your best interest, but also based on what the other players have done in the game, right? So that's a very basic way to think about it. But when we look at Sherry's article, right, she's like really framing accessibility as the game, right? Like, so building an accessibility program is the game. Right. And part of that game is procurement. And so how do the players in that game act in a way that, make decisions, that based on the others' actions? And so, and then what are the outcomes based on that? So it's a fantastic article. If you're unfamiliar with game theory, again, I would do a little research on game theory itself before diving into it. But once you're in there, the connections are all there. It makes so much sense. And it's a really fascinating perspective on accessibility. So yeah, I guess I'll stop there for a moment because I do want, there's a lot to talk about here, but yeah, it's great.
Yeah, that was a great summary. I think you broke it down perfectly, and that is that there's players. Each player has their motivations, and that is how the game is set up. So what does the game board look like? What are the rules of the game? And that's their motivation. And then their actions are dictated by the motivation, but also by the actions of the other players in the game. And I think to bury the lead a little bit here, or to not bury the lead, is that doesn't always lead to the outcomes we think it's going to, or that it should. And I think that is where Sherry really shines in this piece of writing, is that she is able to take us by the hand and walk us through how these things go wrong and don't lead to the I'll call it intended outcomes, right? That probably is arguable too, but certainly the outcomes that most people probably on the surface think that it should lead to. And I'm going to stop there because I know, Justin, you probably can break down some of the details here, and you look like you're ready to. So go for it.
Well, no, it's not. It wasn't that. But there was. I think there's one crucial aspect that you missed with, like every player in the game has their
Wait,
own
if you're going to
motivations.
criticize me, then let's go back to Pete. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
It's not just the motivation; it's the rewards that every
The
player
reward.
gets. So, everyone, like all of the players in this accessibility game, have different motivations for trying to do what they need to do, but they're also rewarded differently.
Mm-hmm.
And for most of the people who are the key decision makers in determining whether or not to purchase or to procure something that is accessible, the reward for them is not, I get to actually use the system. It's, hey, I have now procured this thing so that other people can use it. And those people may or may not, like, they're going to get stuck with whatever was procured. So that to me was the interesting place. And the way that Sherry approaches this as, here's all these different kind of tenets of game theory. Here's how organizational processes fail these types of things. So she's looking at it from the negative, kind of more from the negative aspect, but she does it, I actually think she does it in fairly positive light.
Yeah, well, I think it's so
Mm-hmm.
kind of data driven that yes, it's from the why is this not working? You know, if that's what you mean by negative aspect, but it wasn't. It was actually very interesting and kind of like for me, it was like, oh, well, how do we adjust? You know, it wasn't like off putting or anything like that. I thought it was actually really well done, and that is a good call out. It is the reward. And I can tell you, as somebody with a over 3,600 day streak on Duolingo, which is a heavily gamified platform, it like that reward system, it works way better than we realize. It works. My dad does Duolingo when he talks. I don't care about all that stuff, and I'm like, well, yeah, but have you ever stuck with anything else, Dad? Like you do this 10 hours a day. So it can kind of work behind the scenes too, and we don't realize that reward system is drawing the result off into the wrong direction. You know, which I don't think Sherry says that, but that was one of the things that, as somebody who knows all this really well, like you do, Pete, and like Justin does, I was like, oh, like Sherry really highlighted some things that I hadn't stopped to think about that don't go right in that process.
Yeah. Yeah, and so the other thing, so I mean, to get into more game theory stuff is like there's this concept of like a payoff matrix, right? Where you can think you have two players, right? Like just basic grid, right? 4 quadrants. And so in this case, we have vendor and buyer, right? So vendor can make, in this case, 2 decisions. One is to build their product with accessibility integrated, like from the start, or their decision is to claim accessibility just through internal reporting without actually doing anything, right? And then as a buyer, you have 2 decisions based on those. One is to validate the vendor's conformance claims or accessibility claims, right? Or you just accept their claims. And so the outcomes from all of those different, those 4 different, boxes essentially that you can end up in are very different, right? And so this is where it gets interesting thinking about it from the player's perspective, right? Because if you're the player and you're the vendor, right, like you want to win your bids, right? Like if there's RFPs, you want to win, you want to have a competitive, product, you want to have a low price product so that it can be, purchased easily. But from a buyer's perspective, those all things are actually similar, right? So like you kind of end up in this like worst case scenario for the user of the product. But when the vendor and the buyer are like, oh, hey, like I want to buy a product that, hey, listen, I trust them. They're going to give me a conformance report. Great. Like they have a VPAT. I'm going to trust that. Therefore, the product I'm buying, I can feel like maybe I have some confidence in, but it might not truly be there, but the price point might be correct, right, for you. And the the risk is certainly higher, but you're in a situation where, again, like, you're paying for something that's lower cost. Like, you don't know that there's actual issues, so you can kind of like say, yeah, I'm just going to ignore those. And therefore, like, you've paid less. The vendor, is it costs less for them to develop the thing because they're not integrating accessibility from the start.
Right.
And therefore you end this in a spot where, like, what's best for both vendor and player is, again, that spot where, like, they just claim accessibility and you just accept that claim. And again, that leaves the user behind, because it's the user that has to take that, like, lack of accessibility. They're the ones dealing with it, right? So it's a really interesting model, especially from
It is.
that kind of that first failure point that she talks about. It's essentially the procurement dilemma. That's where this particular one plays into.
Well, she goes on to, and this is interesting. This is another rabbit hole to go down at some point. But she references this paper from 1970 by a guy named George Akerlof, if I'm pronouncing that one right, Justin, called "The Market for Lemons," and it describes what you're describing, Pete, where when buyers can't distinguish good quality before a purchase, then then essentially the lower cost thing becomes the attractive thing, and the the vendors who are creating high quality stuff have to lower their quality in order to compete in that market. And it's kind of a vicious cycle that takes over the market and creates, the market for lemons. Like, everybody would rather pay less, and not even that they even realize it. Like, I think that that's the point, is that it's not even a phenomenon that you realize that, wait, you could be getting something much better, handles risk, but whatever the case is. And the market for lemons was about cars, by the way, just for those of you. And
Who love lemons?
So it's really fascinating how this occurs, and I have to say, from the perspective, and I think all three of us probably have this perspective, that as a vendor who recognizes, like we say all the time, like, oh, if you're going to produce a VPAT yourself, that is going to be regarded differently than if a third-party objective expert like one of our organizations produces it. And sometimes that resonates, other times it doesn't, and the more those are accepted, then the more all of this doesn't mean anything, and that end user who needs the product to be accessible isn't served, I just think, and I think part of it is us as vendors also have a responsibility to lay this out. And us as vendors, you were talking about a project before we heated up the mics, Pete, where you all are working on a vendor program, right? So as the consultant doing that, there's a responsibility that you properly coach your customer to look for that quality, right? So it stays up there, so that VPAT remains meaningful, so that all this stuff, and we have similar projects, and I think we have a similar responsibility. So all the players need to look at how they're affecting the game and changing it, and make sure that they take responsibility for that.
And that's funny, because I feel like, Pete, you kind of touched on failure number one. Mark, you hit failure number two. My interesting one was failure number three, which is the free rider problem. And this idea that if you have 50 people out there buying things, if one of them is the squeaky wheel and gets the vendor to fix their product, then all 49 of the other buyers get that fix. And reading down that list that Sherry listed, I was like, all of these bullets seem like very solvable problems. Like, there's nothing there that, like, publishing, getting something out there that says, like, look, this is how you update. Here's boilerplate language you include in your procurement. That said, and if you do this and your competitor does it and your competitor over there, like, if everybody starts doing this, then the people you're all buying from is going to push that on that, and it's all going to interconnect back, so that everyone, so that we're raising the, all of the boats, so to speak, at the same
Lifts
time.
all ships, yeah.
Yeah. And so, but I read that bulleted list, and I was like, this seems
Well,
solve them.
number three is an interesting one, Justin, because I think it also goes back to kind of the soapbox I think the three of us are always on, and that is to integrate accessibility into your processes, right? Like to
Hmm.
look at accessibility from the beginning. Don't have it be an expensive afterthought. Just make it part of the process of developing something, creating your digital asset. And then you don't have one vendor who kind of takes the hit. You don't have all that stuff occurring. You, as the creator of the product, are just building it in and satisfying it for all these folks. The last thing I'll say, and then we need to move on to the next one, is that I just want to give Sherry a shout out here because this article was incredibly well written. I pride myself in connecting things. I don't think I've ever made a connection this profound. When I was reading this, I was just like taking a look inside Sherry's mind and going, this is incredible that she looked at game theory and applied it to accessibility that way. That's it. I mean, just a fascinating mind and one we need. So if you're not following Sherry's work, please do. She's very prolific content creator in the industry, and it's like that E.F. Hutton thing. Like when she speaks, you should listen. So I was impressed with this from. I know that ages me. I know Justin, but I was impressed with this as a structure, how well structurally the writing was put together, and then her prose and her ability to write in simple, understandable language is incredible. I found myself wanting to go back and reread sections, not because I didn't understand them, but because I wanted to kind of sit with them a little bit longer because of the profound nature. So, anyways, Sherry, love your stuff, love your mind, and love the way you write. Please keep it up.
Just
The
real quick,
next
Mark,
thing we have,
before we hop to that one, though,
what?
I just want to say, so we covered like three of the six failures, kind of that Sherry
Yes.
outlines in that
Yep.
article. So there's some additional things that are really important as it pertains to accessibility and as it relates to game theory and this model. So just want to make sure you all get into that article in some
Dig
more
into
depth
it.
as we
Yeah.
didn't
Do you want
have
to do you
time
want to
to
bullet them
cover
out real
everything.
quick for us, Pete? Or
Yeah, sure. So the fourth is what's called deadlines as commitment devices, right? So this is again using like thinking about Title II deadlines and how that got shifted and how people thought, oh, great, hey, we now have more time, and then they sat back and still haven't doing, and now they're like going to be entering that re-panic cycle because it's going to be coming up again. But so there's a lot about deadlines and kind of using deadlines as part of things to push projects forward. The fifth one was called repeated games, and it's about really just uh, thinking about like an ongoing basis. How do you do this in a way that continues this work, right? So it's not just like, oh, give me a VPAT now and then we're good, right? It's like
right.
moving forward, getting
You
consistent
you
updates,
finish
and
the level. Now you can go have lunch, right? No, you got to keep going.
right. And then the final failure that is talked about is about litigation and the option to change the game instead of playing it if that's an option for you. So again, really interesting stuff. Get in there. I guess final like at the end of the day, right? What wins here is like sustainable accessibility programs. Like they are always going to win. It's just a matter of like how do you get there, right? And how do you
Yep.
use procurement as a part of it.
Well, I think that the next article needs to be a direct correlation between Donkey Kong and accessibility. We can do it. I know we can do it.
To make it happen. Yeah.
Yeah, we can make it happen. All right, so the next article we wanted to talk about is the web is being made accessible for AI, not people. This is by Jonathan Zong and Frank Elvasky. Did I come close that time, Justin?
Alavsky, yeah.
This is how we do this, Pete. I pronounce stuff wrong, and Justin.
Oh, I've
corrects
watched. I know.
me. And I thought that this one was interesting because the big flip, and then I'll turn it over. I don't know if you want to grab this one, Justin, to start. But the big flip for me was that I've heard a lot of people say like, oh, with AI uses the web more in the way that people with disabilities do. So we're starting to see things become more accessible because AI needs it. And this article goes, yeah, but, and it sort of flips that around and says, kind of like, A, we should be building for people with disabilities first, not AI first, and B, it doesn't quite work that that way, that you need to build for people with disabilities. You can't just be like, oh, we're doing it for AI, that covers it, that there's more to be done. And I've not heard anybody step in with that take. It was the same with the kind of the SEO in the past. Everybody said, oh, accessibility and SEO tied together. And yes, big, huge part of that middle part of that Venn diagram, but not, they're not the same thing. So I don't know, Justin, what did you think when you dug into this article?
I mean, for me, it wasn't necessarily like the AI aspect of it that I really got into. This, we've talked about this on previous episodes, about the overlap between AI and accessibility, and how some things are getting that are AI related. People are doing things to make improvements for AI to gather information from content, or to make content specifically available to AI, and there's negatives from that. For me, the part that I thought was actually kind of interesting was this idea that the ramping automation effect, and how that, like, we're trying to do things like cities and towns and governments and everything only want to are now starting to only want to do things for to do curb cuts in the event that it helps everyone. Like, they're not going to just make like call out specifically for to help those that are disabled or that need additional support. It's like, oh, it has to help everyone, and if it doesn't help everyone, then why are we going to do it? And so that for me was kind of actually the really interesting article, and some of the anecdotes and things that they pulled from that.
Yeah.
Would you think, Pete?
I was thinking so it's interesting because one of the examples they use, right, is creating an LLM's text file, right, that essentially kind of takes your content, distills it into a flat Word file so that it's easy to discover from an LLM perspective, right? And I think that's very different than when we're talking about making your website accessible for AI agents, right? To be able to come and do something, right? To buy a product, to, fill out a form, to whatever, right? To actually like do something versus like discover the information that's on your site. And so like the discoverability, right? A lot of content users want their discoverability there so that when you search for something or you're doing queries, prompts in different AI tools, that like your resources show up as kind of as part of that, right? And again, I think that's very different than when we're thinking about like user interactions and then how those play out for for like a screen reader versus an AI agent type of situation. And furthermore, like the article talks about physical accessibility, right? You just mentioned curb cuts, and like they talk a lot about like these delivery robots and stuff, and how now municipalities are starting to care about like the accessibility of their infrastructure, but it's from the lens of like, oh, we got to support these robots, right? It's not, we've got to support the people that already live here that need to access things.
Going back to Justin's point, we got to support those robots because those robots support everyone. So now we can do it.
Now we can do it.
Yeah.
It almost this article almost seemed like two separate articles. Like, I kind of went back, like I was like reading along, and I was like, all right, I'm with you through the element, for the AI part, and then we jumped to like curb cuts, and I was like, all right, wait, I feel like I missed something, like a transition piece there, but I got it. Eventually, like they make the point that, like, if you start, I think it was just kind of one of those moments, like Mark and I have these all the time, where like you're reading something, it kind of triggers this other thought that this one little thing that you're reading is actually like a notch in this much bigger picture of, we're going to we'll totally jump on this bandwagon, we'll totally do all these things, as long as it benefits everyone. And again, we'll see the benefit if it benefits anyone, and that was kind of the pushback with SEO. Like, oh well, SEO is going to make it easier for everyone to find our sites. It's not the fact that we have to make our site more accessible to improve our SEO.
The thing I find interesting, just as an aside, or one of the things that I was kind of like dawning on me as I read this article, and again, I think the three of us probably at some point or at several points have said something like, well, when you make a document accessible or you make a website accessible, it's just the way you should do it, right? Like with proper semantic structure. Like when I get in and write something, you know, H1s, H2s, blah blah blah, you know, like, and you just do it by habit, and now you can call up the navigation thing, and you can, you know, follow through it, and it makes sense for everyone, and you can collapse sections, and people with disabilities can, you know, it become like doing it in a way that's accessible becomes the right way to do it. And for me, this was almost a bit of like I felt a little bit of like told you so, right? And I think the curb cutout example is a good one where it's like, yeah, these robots can run around and do this stuff for everyone. Because back in 1990, somebody put a law in place that said you needed curb cutouts. And that was done. It's like you don't always need to sit there and figure out why these things are good for anybody, quite frankly. You just need to at some point accept, like, wait a minute, this should just be the way these things are made, right? And I'll give you this is a really out there example, but like my son's a skateboarder, and in the US, when you have, like, say a bench in a park or in front of a building.
Bench.
Bench. Yeah, that you would sit on. They have what are called skate stoppers, which are just pieces of metal that come out so you can't grind, you can't slide your board easily along that. Well, in a lot of Europe, they consider that if you build something that can't withstand somebody skating on it, you've built it wrong. And they don't have, you know, they don't put the skate stoppers around. They just say build it correctly. And if a skateboard can destroy it, it wasn't built well enough, you know. And you know, changes skate culture and all that kind of stuff. But it's a little bit like that. Like the resistance against it creates something inferior, and then when things come around, now you don't have it, right? And I think that that's where we are with the web. Like with all these websites written without proper semantic structure, well, now AI can't parse that very well, right? Maybe you have your SEO in place in a good way for traditional Google SEO, but that's changing. And, you know, as I think Pete, you outlined in the beginning, and what you're looking for there is AI gives you an answer, but AI cites those answers, and you want to be in those citations. That is the new way to be discovered. Like if you're a business or whatever, and you want people to find your site. And the businesses who were coding accessibility all along, they don't need to do anything for AI. And they had done it right to begin with for people with disabilities. So that was the kind of like, I had this, like, if people just listen to begin with, we didn't even have to have this article, but there it is.
I got two things to say there. So one is interesting, you brought up kind of skate blockers. So I grew up skateboarding as well, and like I'm very familiar with those and how they change skate spots, you know, over time. And it's interesting. So there's a whole concept around like hostile architecture, right? And things. So that's concepts of like doing things so that, you know, making things with like pointy surfaces so that people who are homeless can't sit or lay on them, right? That type of thing. And in some ways, a lot of those places where those skate blockers are installed are places where people typically sit and make the sitting experience worse for those people.
Degrades everything.
Right? Yeah. So it's like stopping one thing but making it worse for kind of most people. It's a really interesting thing. But back to the, you know, the AI and accessibility space, what I find pretty frustrating is that, you know, there are a couple organizations in our industry that have kind of pivoted their marketing messaging around, you know, it used to be all about the people and doing accessibility, right? And now it's like, oh, hey, guess what? Like our tools will help you make, you know, will be a benefit to your AI performance and also people, right? It's almost like now they've like flipped it and they're like leading with the AI versus leading with the human. And I'm like, man, like you were an accessibility focused company, and to make that pivot in a messaging is just really disappointing. And I think
that's I think it's a really good point. And I think ultimately, Pete, that it'll be, I already see it, that's backfiring a little bit. And that organizations, which tend to be the smaller boutique style accessibility organizations that have stayed human centric, they're not now starting to kind of shine because they stayed human focused. I think it's a really good point, and I think that AI is not something to be ignored, but the hard shift over to it, I think, is some folks are kind of having to reel that back a little bit, and
chasing dollars.
there's no, I mean, it's just you can just know it, right? You can just feel it, that accessibility is a human centric thing, full stop. And anything, even if it's a current buzzword like AI, that you let get in the way of that is only going to lead you down a bad path for a period of time. It's not that you can't recover from it, and it's not that you shouldn't figure out how AI fits. It's that you need to stay focused on the human centric. So, anyways, I think that's a really, really good point, Pete.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on the web is being made accessible for AI, not people, before we move on? That was a big article too. I think we could go forever, but I think we got it.
Yeah, and it was a good article. I don't want to it seemed like two articles, like that wasn't judgmental or anything. Like it was a good article. It was just kind of like took me a minute to figure out like how they were kind of approaching like the accessibility side of stuff.
No, I don't think anybody took it or I didn't take it that way. I think that's a sign of quality writing when you are bringing a couple things together and it causes people to think about it, right? That's what all the writing should do, is cause people to think, and it causes you to stop and think. So Disability is a Pawn in Geopolitics by Bianca Prinz. Hopefully I'm saying your name right, Bianca. This was really an interesting one. And again, before the mics heated up, we kind of started to, just for the listener, I had to stop these two. Like, stop talking. This is good podcast stuff. But the point that was made here is that Meta gave away, and I'm starting to lose my details because we've talked about so many different things here, but Meta gave away a bunch of glasses, 15,000 free Meta glasses were offered by an Irish disability organization, which is absolutely generous. And on the surface, you go, wow, right? And just to frame it for people who may not know, Meta glasses actually are a pretty big advancement in assistive technology, particularly for people who are blind, because the onboard camera can, there's a lot of reasons, right? One of them is because the onboard camera can feed information, including recognizing somebody's face, telling them who's there, giving them information about the environment. It's an incredible add-on to the environmental knowledge, which I think for a person, and I'm not blind, so I don't have a lived experience, so pardon me if I'm relaying this a little bit off, but my take on it is that a lot of blind people, like, their environmental awareness sort of stopped at the end of their cane, unless they could hear something in the distance, and then something like a Meta glasses starts to bring that awareness and much more broad to them. Just to give it a quick way to think about it, but there's a lot of advantages for people who are blind, and I would imagine other people with disabilities, cognitive disabilities, and stuff like that. So, and then the flip side that we've talked about before on this is that there's privacy concerns. So we've heard a lot, or we've seen a lot of content out there about great assistive technology bumping up against privacy concerns, which this article crosses. But it was really interesting what they actually dove into. And I'm going to stop there and I don't know who wants to take it, but if you want to describe the real point of what this article.
Go ahead, Pete.
It's hard, right?
It is hard. But I mean, so I think one thing to point out here too is like Mark, you mentioned this, but right. So this announcement came out, and I think a lot of people's reaction to the announcement that these glasses are being given to free to blind and visually impaired people is this like awesome thing, right? It's going to really help them, and for the most part, that is absolutely true, right? But it's like, is Meta playing geopolitical games by essentially using this donation as a way to get, more acceptance on their glasses in places, particularly in the EU, where privacy laws are much stricter than they are here in the US. And so the article is really about that conversation. And it is, not to, you mentioned that you've covered this before in the podcast, right? But like, the privacy concerns are legitimate, right? I mean, there's a big difference between someone, having a phone in their hand, like sticking it in your face, and you can be like, I'm pretty sure that person's recording me, and I can like at least, have that knowledge and like try to do something about it. Whereas if it's just, on your face, and side note, there's supposed to be technology to like, stop the recording if the light that turns on when you're recording is blocked. But there's been like a bunch of people who have done tests, and in many cases you can block that light, so like the people you're recording don't know you're recording, which again is like, it's creeper status, right? There's a lot of really creepy things that could happen with that technology. But on the flip side, right, being able, if your vision is you don't have any, or it's so degraded where you can't, perceive your environment, and you can say, hey, M word, like, what's in front of me, right? And then like the tool, like the glasses literally just tell you like, oh, hey, like, what's in front of you, like, or hey, I'm in a hallway, like, where's the bathroom, or where's the door to the bathroom, right? And it like guides you, it tells you where that bathroom door is. Like, that is incredibly helpful technology, right? But so how do you balance that with, the privacy concerns of everyday, people that are in the videos, right? And that's not even talking about like facial recognition and getting into all of that like personally identifiable stuff. But back to the article again, it's more about like, is Meta using, essentially people who are blind as, as a pawn, as a piece
crowbar
in this girl. Exactly.
Yeah, to wedge open the privacy restrictions that are restricting the purchasing of that product.
Right.
I think that,
and potentially, what are they doing with all the data? Right. They might even be like using this donation as a way to like really kickstart some significant data collection initiative that they have internally that we don't know about.
And the law is always behind the technology, right? So you might think to yourself like, oh, we just put laws in place. The laws take a long time. So there's a significant period of time that'll pass before a law catches up, whether it's data privacy, restricting what can be done with the data, or whether it's some of these other, the sort of what I would call like the locker room privacy concerns, where somebody could be videoing you in areas where you definitely don't want to be videoed, right? I think that's, it's interesting to me because as I was reading it, one of the things I thought about is like, haven't we been here before, right? This has all happened before. It'll all happen again. Let's see, a reference that you guys can try and figure out if you want. But I think when you made the example of cell phones, Pete, and I think that was one of the things that people, when cell phones came out, everybody had a camera, and it wasn't relative to what photography used to be like. It wasn't as obvious. People could be recording, and quite frankly, like with pinhole cameras, like if you want to sneak a camera in, it's very, very doable. So it's kind of interesting that there's, and this is just me not having dug into it, but it's kind of interesting that there's not already a precedent established for that kind of thing. And maybe the feeling is, to your point, Pete, is like, oh, hey, we're in a locker room, would you mind just maybe putting your phone away, because we can't tell if you're, maybe if somebody's got a point at the floor, you don't care, but if they're holding it up in a different way, you might say something, you might have an inkling. So it's interesting to me that, recording, listening devices, cameras, small cameras, all this stuff have been around. So I'm curious, and maybe somebody can help me with this, as to why this isn't already pretty well covered in regulation and laws. I don't know. Maybe one of you guys know.
No, I don't have insight into that, but we have definitely moved into a surveillance society. So
we have, yeah.
I'd argue that like it's because it's really around money and the data, right? It's like, it's the people that have that influence on politics that can say, hey, like one of the things that Bianca covers is around, like hypothetically speaking, like is Meta able to kind of put leverage on the EU because they're saying, hey, we have these really incredible technology that's helping people with disabilities, but your GDPR kind of doesn't allow this to work. So like maybe their goal is to influence the EU to loosen restrictions so that these tools are available. Therefore, their market is now much larger.
Not much larger,
right?
Yeah. It's interesting because I get every once in a while in one of my social media feeds, I get I sort of feel honored that I get this, but it's a advertisement for an app that gives you three political angles, like the ultra conservative, the ultra liberal, and the one in between. I don't do it because they want my money and I don't want to give it to them, but it kind of like, that's what I liked about this article, is it sort of said like, hey, don't be completely disillusioned or illusioned by this charitable, seemingly wonderful thing. Take a look at it from a few different angles and dig into a little bit, because the motivation could be completely different. And by the way, I have no problem. It's a philosophy of ours. Like our philosophy as business is value first, which means that when we put marketing and content materials out there, we try to put something out there of value and let that speak for us, versus traditional, like, hey, we're the best and here's the 5 reasons why, So I'm a big fan of something that serves multiple purposes if it's for the right reason. So I don't have a problem with Meta going, like, we're going to do something good and it's going to give us some marketing too. Like, rock and roll. That's better than marketing without the good thing, right? But that doesn't mean that there's not these real sneaky agendas behind something. And I don't think anybody's saying that's the case with Meta. I don't think that the article did. Maybe you guys got a different take on it.
No,
I think they were saying, like,
that's not saying that. But.
Yeah, they were saying, like, think about this a little bit, and I think it's a good thing to think about.
Yeah, I mean, it's Meta, so you know that they're already going to be collecting tons and tons of data from them, and so that's a given, and you could kind of stop there with it and be like, all right, well, they're going to give all these 15,000 people glasses. Yes, maybe they're going to get some new training data. They're going to do some stuff there, but it's going to get them a lot richer data set. Particularly, maybe no one's buying Meta glasses in Ireland, and they want to get more information about
Ireland,
and maybe that's all it is. But the fact that, like, you could give 15,000 glasses to just about any country, like, there's going to be people that would be well served within almost any country by 15,000 glasses. The fact that maybe it was Ireland, maybe it was an EU country, like, all these kind of things start to, put your tinfoil hat on, like, and get a little conspiratorial, but, like, there's probably some reason behind it. And, like, to be said in what was in the article, like, there's maybe a additional motive here other than doing the right thing and getting a little bit of extra data for our models and things, behind this decision.
So, a question for both of you: What if they said, we want to donate 15,000 Meta glasses to Ireland for people with disabilities, and also because we feel that Ireland's laws around privacy are more restrictive than they should be, and we're hoping this sheds some light and changes our mind? What if they were just like, and again, we're making an assumption that there was an actual ulterior motive here. I don't think anybody knows that. We should say that right out. This is speculative. But what if they just came out and said, like, yeah, they are tighter. We do want it to change. And we believe it should change for the following reasons. And we also want to do something good. So here's our 2 reasons. Have 15,000 Meta glasses. Would that change the way you guys would feel about that, or how would that make you feel? Is actually, we'll get into a therapy session. How would that make you feel, Pete? How would that make you feel?
Well,
lay down on a couch.
my initial thought with that question, to be honest, is like, well, I don't really have an opinion because I'm not Irish, right? Like
right.
if it's the people of Ireland that have voted that say, hey, listen, we want strict privacy like laws here, and that's why there's privacy laws there, then they should be respected, right? And to have a corporation come and be like, yeah, we don't like these laws. We want to have all of these people with disabilities get on our side so that they help promote our cause.
Yeah.
And therefore maybe the government listens more because we have all of these proponents, behind us. That I don't know. So part of me is like, again.
Well, what if it was your country? I mean, you could put this anywhere. What if this was happening in your town? Because your town had in Vermont. Vermont's like, no, we got all these privacy laws, and so they gave 15,000 to Vermont. Would that, and you're a part of like, I guess what I'm saying is that if they're being transparent about saying, we get that you voted this and we get why, but we want to do this for the good of people with disabilities, but also to maybe show you something different than what you've considered around the value of this product and around, that might change your mind about the restrictions that you put on it. Not that you would actually change your mind, but how would you feel if an organization like Meta was that transparent about their motives versus?
I mean, personally, I just wouldn't trust them. But that's just like my, I think, distrust for that type of like mega corporation and their motives and what they are up to.
Yeah.
So personally, I wouldn't believe them in terms of like this being an altruistic thing and just for the good of everybody. But I don't want, that's like my.
Well, that's what I'm asking for your thoughts.
Conspiracy theory, situation, and I don't want to go down that path. But at the same time, I just don't.
Yeah.
I don't see them having like look, right. Business is the goal of business is to make money, and when you're when you're a public company, the goal is to make your shareholders the most money possible, right? And so when you have an organization that seems to be doing something from this like altruistic perspective, in many cases that kind of fights with their business goal of being more profitable, right? And driving more shareholder value. So that's where I think my distrust for that type of thing comes from, is that it just doesn't align necessarily. Now, again, like the benefit to the people though might be astronomical, right? The people that get these glasses, right? I mean, they're expensive. They are. There's a cost prohibitive, piece to this. So like having these glasses gifted to somebody who actually could take, benefit and use them and really change their lives is, I can't even fathom how much that impact that could have for somebody.
I mean, for the blind people, I can remember Matt Ader, actually getting a chance to talk to one of the developers for Meta, and it was like, he was like fanboying. He was like, I've got a list. These work great for me. I've got a list. Can you do these changes and whatever, you know what I mean? Or can you show me how this works or whatever? So just by his enthusiasm towards the way that this had a profound effect on his daily life, or my perception was that was happening. I can say that you're absolutely right. But if I'm hearing you right, Pete, is you're sort of saying the mistrust is there. Being transparent about a piece of it doesn't change it. You still mistrust. Justin.
I think it does depend on the company. Like if it's a company that you already feel has goodwill and has already done altruistic things, and not to besmirch Meta, like they have done other altruist. This is not their first dip of the toe in the waters of altruism. I'm going to see how many times I can say that until we end. But
toe in the water of altruism.
Yes, but there's just something that kind of like the timing of it, like it just doesn't pass the sniff test. That said, what I do like what Pete was saying, I do think that whatever whatever they do, whatever their long-term plan is, this is a bet against it. And I think that the payoff of giving 15,000 people a set of these meta glasses, the good that's going to come from that is going to, I think that's going to outshine whatever potentially could come. And there's so many other roadblocks in between. Hey, we just gave people 15,000 pairs of glasses out to, hey, because of that, we were able to get the EU to relax this particular statute in the GDPR and all these other things, we open up this kind of loopholes. So
Yeah.
I think that the good is going to be a higher net.
I think you're starting to get to where I think I am on this, right? And that's that, first and foremost, giving away 15,000 glasses to people with disabilities is good. And then secondly, I think that the reason why I really like this article is because it kind of says, going back to my other example, like, don't just take things at the surface, like, look deeper into this. And I think that if we do that, you get two things become served, right? One, there's this altruistic, and by the way, I think it's fantastic, right, that they're giving these to people with disabilities. I don't want to bury that at all. I think that part of it is fantastic.
Yeah.
And I think that if it challenges people's how the EU's doing privacy and causes them to re-examine it under a different light, that's positive too. That if and that if we all take a step back and realize and think about it in the way that the article is telling us to, which is, don't just take that at face value, but look at all these things that it could be sort of pushing against, then we all can go like, yes, absolutely, it's pushing against privacy, and yes, we will open the folder back up again and reevaluate it, but that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to change our minds, unless there's something exposed that causes that to be the right thing to do. So I think that that's what I would take from this article, is it's like, look at everything, people. And if you look at everything, then this can just be a good deed. But if we stay closed and blindfolded and only look at that, the altruistic aspect of it, and not consider the other implications that it might have, then you might find that something happened that you didn't really want to happen. So it's more of an awareness, advocating for total awareness rather than, and we are all, social media, the news, everything nowadays doesn't say here's what's going on. It says here's how you should think about what's going on. And I think that that's the caution, is we need to not listen to that part of it and step back and think independently and from several angles. So that's what I really liked about the article. And the fact that it exposed I wouldn't have thought of that. Like, full disclosure, I would have gone, yay meta. And I'm still going, yay meta. But now I'm going, yay meta, and let's make sure we keep a critical eye on these other things. So I'm not claiming at all to be immune to it, right? I appreciate when people talk about it. So anyways, any other thoughts about this before we wrap it up?
Altruism.
Dipping your toe in the pool, what did you say? In the waters?
In the waters of altruism.
In the waters of altruism.
Mm-hmm. I feel like that's got to be a river in a fantasy novel somewhere.
The river of
river of altruism, like a Terry Pratchett
the waters
novel.
Or is it like the fountain of youth? Would it be like a fountain of altruism? Like if you
maybe
drink the waters, you become altruistic?
Maybe.
Gotta find that.
Start writing. Mm-hmm. Start writing, Pete.
I need to find that, and I need a squirt gun.
Yeah.
I'm gonna weaponize the waters of altruism.
You think meta glasses are making you think? How about my altruism squirt gun? All right. Well, I hope you both find your altruism squirt guns. And I repeat, thank you. First of all, thank you for being proactive and reaching out to us. I'm so glad that we finally got this done. Great topics and great discussion. exceeded my expectations. I should have known with you on that we'd have such a good show. Now that we have broken down accessibility for you, we hope you go forth and keep it accessible.
Thank you for listening to the Accessibility Breakdown by Inclusion Impact Accessibility.